in college when your family got their first car?
And that's how we ended up over there. They bought that house. They were buying it.
So they bought a house brand new?
Yes.
5, 4,
Who knew that?
2,
Who knew that?
1.
Palm Bluff would come up, like University of Palm Bluff, or like I know you all know it's Branch Normal and AM and N.
Hey y'all, welcome to the Branch Normal collection. This is episode 1. We're just getting started. This is it's going to be a conversation with Kirwyn Sutherland. We're going to be talking to him about his life and also about his book that he released called Jump Ship. He released it before all hell broke loose, before COVID, right? January of 2020. So we're going to talk to him. And but first, let's talk about our spotlight, right? So every episode, we're going to do a spotlight where we recognize somebody, an influential in Black history that may not get talked about quite enough, right? So today, let's get into it. One of my favorite albums is The Love Below by Andre 3000. This album came out in 2003. I think I was a sophomore in college in Georgia at the time. Released in 2003, that album includes a song called My Favorite Things. This song was first introduced to the public in the movie The Sound of Music, which I think was the 40s, something like that. Mid 40s, I feel like The Sound of Music came out. While Andre's rendition of the song is amazing, the best rendition was produced by saxophone player and Philadelphia native John Coltrane. John Coltrane was born in Hamlet, North Carolina on September 23rd, 1926. He moved to Philly with his mother and his cousin when he was 16 years old, a little while after his father and grandfather suddenly passed away. Around this time, his mother brought him his first saxophone, and he began playing both the clarinet and the saxophone in a community band. After returning from the Navy, he started playing as many gigs as possible. During this time, he crossed paths with jazz greats such as Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, and Miles Davis. He worked closely with Monk and served as a member of the Miles Davis Band until an addiction to heroin got him kicked out of the group. For 5 days, he closed himself off in a room at his house in Philadelphia, which is still standing as of 2021, and it's located at 33rd and Oxford. If you're living in Philly, go check the house out. We are not sure how long this house is going to be standing. Right now, it's actually in jeopardy of possibly being taken away because of development, gentrification in the area. There have already been 2 murals covered up in Philly of John Coltrane within the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years due to gentrification. All right. So in that 5 days John Coltrane spent in his room at his house, he amazingly kicked his heroin habit cold turkey. It was 1957 and he was around 31 years old. For the next 10 years, he put out album after album, always practicing, always working, always producing music, always composing music. Besides My Favorite Things, some of my Coltrane go-tos include Alabama and the album A Love Supreme. On both projects, John Coltrane used words or poetry for the catalyst of the music. Alabama was produced after the Birmingham, Alabama bombing, where 4 little black girls were killed. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech 3 days after the murders. On the song Alabama, John Coltrane patterns his saxophone playing after the words in the speech by Martin Luther King, even changing the tone from one of mourning to a tone of determination, just as King did in his speech. Coltrane used the same method in the 4th movement of A Love Supreme. That's the 4th track on the album A Love Supreme, where he took one of his own poems and patterned his saxophone playing after the poem. For more information about John Coltrane, check out the Chasing Train documentary. It's narrated by Denzel Washington. It was on Netflix. You can probably catch it on YouTube right now, some clips. Google it, though. It's called Chasing Train, and train is spelled Trane. So check that out. It's a documentary called Chasing Train by Denzel Washington. The BBC did a documentary on John Coltrane, I believe, in the early 90s, maybe. And there are a few other John Coltrane documentaries. You can find his music, live music or live performances on YouTube. And you can find his music anywhere streaming on all streaming platforms. While you check out John Coltrane, also be sure to check out Alice Coltrane, who is his wife, his second wife, after Naima. So check out Alice Coltrane because she's an amazing artist in her own right. And I'll say this, the last thing I'll say about them, both of their music, all of their compositions were really spiritual. After his heroin addiction, he really takes a deep dive into spirituality, and they both go on that journey, as you can kind of see through the music as you listen to it, even in 2021. The John Coltrane, both his grandfathers were ministers, so that spirituality kind of starts at the very beginning of his life, even before he's born, and he kind of carries that throughout his life, up to the point where there was a church in San Francisco that worshiped John Coltrane almost as a Jesus figure, almost. But you can find that out in your research. Check out the documentaries. Check out John Coltrane if you hadn't heard of him, or if you just hadn't listened to him in a while or hadn't checked out his story. All right. So now we're going to get into our interview with Kirwyn Sutherland. And thank you for checking out the Branch Normal collection. Yeah. So, yeah, man. So we're just, yeah, I didn't know a lot of that either. Like, I didn't realize that he had kicked the heroin habit in like 5 days by himself, which is crazy.
It's insane. It's insane to me. Like, and I think also another thing that stood out to me was the patterning his speeches or his compositions after speeches. Like, I had heard about poets writing poems called Coltrane poems. They were in the tradition of John Coltrane. Like, my Twitter handle is @Coltrane poem. So like, I and it's because like I had heard about like poets who kind of like pattern their poetry after the way John Coltrane played. So
yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know either. I didn't realize because The Love Supreme is one of my favorite albums, right? So I didn't realize. I think the fourth track or fourth movement is called Psalm, right? PSALM. Mm-hmm. And so another word for poem, right? So I didn't realize that he had like taken that and like pretty much put it on the stand as they were recording, right? In the studio, he puts it on the stand and starts playing from there. And I'm just like, oh, that's crazy.
Right, exactly. Just that just a master of improvisation. Like that's the improvisation that like I think we as poets like always are like searching for when we're performing. Like that like thing that's like, how are we gonna approach it this time? Or, and how's it gonna be different? And we always chasing that like, high of like, feeling in the zone. Or in the pocket,
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy because he's also. It's interesting that Miles Davis kicks him out of the band because we're always kind of told that Miles Davis is an asshole that doesn't care about anybody, right? Yeah. That's kind of the story we get about Miles Davis.
True.
And in this situation, if Miles Davis doesn't kick John Coltrane out of the band for being a heroin addict, we never get John Coltrane. Like, that doesn't happen. Like,
this is true. This is true.
Everything we talk about with John Coltrane happens between 1957 and 1967. Like, this 10-year time period. And so,
yeah, like that part is like, you know, that's a poem right there. Like somebody stuck like kicking a heroin habit like in one room. Like that's like what do the demons look like in that room? Like you know, crazy.
Yeah. You're 30, 31 years old. You know what I mean? Like and yeah, it like all these things like kind of start from like teenage years and stuff, like kind of go up. I mean, one alone to be Black in America in 1957 is crazy. I mean, we're talking about 2 years, to put that in context, we're talking 2 years after like Rosa Parks and Emmett Till, right? If the civil rights movement starts in 1955, it's 1957. So like this is the like time period that you're in. And so it's crazy to like even not to even be on heroin too long, but to like have this out of like world escape that this drug kind of produces. But then like what is the come down to come back into the reality of a Black person in America? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I can't imagine.
Right. So one thing I really like about jazz is kind of like this, you get a like kind of have a pattern. It's kind of what you talked about earlier, just improvisation. You kind of have a theme, and then you just get to like draw circles around that, but you get to draw wide circles, large circles, circles that might look like a square a little bit, circles that might look like a triangle a little bit. You get to do all these things around this like one idea. And when I think about that, like I think about Ars Poetica and Jump Ship, right? And so I kind of want you to talk about what does Ars Poetica like mean, and like what is that, like what purpose does it serve in your book?
Yeah, like that's a really great way of putting it. I didn't think about it like that, but I think I started writing Ars Poetica when I wrote or when I read Ars Poetica by a poet named Krista Franklin. Well, a poet and an artist named Krista Franklin. She wrote a poem called Ars Poetica or Manifesto number 2 or Manifesto number 2 Ars Poetica, I forget. But it was like it was like one of the best poems I ever read, and I still like reference it. And I'm like, what is the Ars Poetica? Because usually when I had classically seen Ars Poetica, it was mostly just about like, you know, the art of poetry. So normally I see like, you know, like poetry is this, or this is how my poetry goes, or it's like a thesis statement about your poetry. But this Ars Poetica was like, you know, it brought in a lot of allusions of African culture, African American culture. It was like, you know, just totally different. It was like really like a journey through her personal history and through Black history. And so for me, I was like, that opened it up into like, oh, like Ars Poetica for me is like very much like a journey through the mind about a specific subject. So like, you know, I had the first Ars Poetica I wrote was Ars Poetica number 2 in the book. That's the first one I wrote. And when I wrote it, I was just thinking about just the effect that racism at the time was having on me. And that is a very much like, for me, it was like a really meditative process. Like how am I processing it in my mind? And so that's how I view Ars Poetica, is like the processing of the mind. So, you know, I wrote like, so I really structured my book around these 5 Ars Poetica where I kind of like am processing different things, you know, in those different poems. And so it's not like a lot of action in the poem. It's more so a lot of meditation and a lot of bringing myself from like one state of mind to the next and back, and, you know, and back and forth that way. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about Ars Poetica 3 specifically. And like, as I'm thinking about, there's a particular line that I like thinking about. And as I'm reading that, I'm thinking about John Coltrane and Alabama as a song. So 4 little girls bombed in Alabama, right? Right. He makes the speech. He records, John Coltrane records Alabama. And this is a song like that, a composition I get exposed to when I come to grad school at Temple in 2008. But when I think about John Coltrane, you're not thinking about a revolutionary, right? You're not thinking about this rebel necessarily. And I think a lot of people don't even think about like, don't equate him with civil rights in any type of way.
Yeah.
But then when you hear Alabama, it's like, no, I played my part. And so, but just in researching him, he didn't necessarily identify with Malcolm X, identified more with Martin Luther King, which is like almost a debate in our community. It's like, oh, who are you most like? Type thing, right? You don't really get to take a little bit from each person. You know, exactly. Like which one are you most like? And so I'm thinking about this line in your poem. It says, and it's like I'm supposed to grieve, and it's like I'm supposed to know death, routine like this. And if I leave, I'm a traitor, and if I stay, I am exploiting. Mm-hmm. I just want you to talk. What does that line mean? Like, where's that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, that poem is, I'll say like that poem specifically was like very much like, you know, I'm talking in my mind, like, you know, and so it was very like stream of consciousness, like just kind of straight through. And so I think the part that I guess sticks out to me the most when I hear it back is if I leave, I'm a traitor, and if I stay, I'm exploiting. And I felt that way in a sense, like if I stay, like maybe like thinking about like Black death in general, but also writing about it like incessantly, mm-hmm. like what does that do to, you know, the people around me, you know, the audience, like my own poetics, like how is that, like, you know, like is that exploiting, you know, the folks that I'm writing about, you know, and if I leave or if I don't talk about it, like, you know, don't I have like, you know, aren't I supposed to talk about this, you know, if it's happening, you know what I mean? So it's like this like catch-22 where I kind of felt like, okay, like I don't know how to talk about this stuff, you know? And so I think that's where the meditation comes in, and it's like, you know, it's like I'm stuck here, you know, in spite of my well-being in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and poetry is weird sometimes because it's like, if you write about a certain thing or a certain topic, you're kind of made to be an expert on it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And you're sort of like almost forced to like stick to that subject, right? It's almost like you're married to it now. You know what I mean? Oh, you did this poem about this in 2015. Like, oh, now it's 2021, and I'm going to ask you about this murder trial just because I heard that poem 6 years ago. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Or it's like, yo, Kirwyn, do this poem, do the Eric Garner poem. I'm like, damn, like, you know, like it's just like, because like, and then I get it, because it's like, okay, like you heard this poem and it really impacted you, you know, but the poem, you know, does something to me, you know, also. So it's like, you know, it's like people like kind of scream out like, hey, you need to do this poem. And it's kind of like, well, what if I don't want to do it today? Like, right. You know, and what does that say? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no, that's real. I mean, I think about Andre having to do Hey Ya a million times. Like,
right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like, and this is not, yeah, what is that like though? For you, is poetry a getting out? So, I mean, and I'll go back to John Coltrane, just talking about spirituality, right? It felt like he was always searching, right? And always studying. He was studying different religions and different like types of spirituality and making music at the same time. What I know about you is that you're always taking in, right? Mm-hmm. And you're always writing as well and practicing. And so I know, like, so what is that? Like, is that what is that? I don't even know what the question is. It's like, it's this cycle that I notice.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Like, you know, it's something that I really like know about myself, that like I'm a researcher by nature. And so when I find something that's interesting to me, like that researcher thing kicks in really, really heavy. And so, it's like I have this like researcher thing, and then I have like this poet thing, and sometimes like the two don't line up. Because like I'm like, I was supposed to write a poem about this, but before you know it, I have like 7 articles about this subject, and all of them are highlighted, and I don't have like poem the first. So it's like, I'm always like thinking about it in the terms of like, I want to find out more about this topic, and sometimes like it may not jibe with like the instinctual or like the kind of like and I'll say like the improvisational nature of like how I write poems. Sometimes like those two things like don't really jibe. And so I'm often like really like thinking about different things, always like, researching different things. And sometimes it feels like the poetry is static in those times,
Right.
Yeah.
No, I feel that makes sense. Now you mentioned just being this researcher by nature. One, what's your sign?
Oh,
What's your zodiac sign?
Aquarius.
Aquarius.
Yeah.
Okay. And what oh, sorry. But you can say it in the background. Aquemini is one of my favorite albums. That's where my mind went. Aquarius. Big Boys Aquarius. But so my other question is, how you fulfill that researcher side?
Yeah, like my 9-to-5 job is I work in clinical research. And so that really, really takes up a lot of time, but it definitely fulfills that research side because it's always an investigation of something at my job. And so, but it is a mode of like, you have like a specific problem and you're trying to go through these steps to find a solution. And so in that way, there are like paths that are pretty defined. And if they aren't defined, they're like steps to them. Like everything is pretty process heavy. And how I write poetry is kind of like, anti to that. It's not like very process heavy. It's very much like, like I think of like a line, or more often I think of an image. That's kind of like more how it goes. And so, the researcher part of me is like, it's kind of been trained to think about things in like a process driven way. And when I'm writing poems, like I can't really think about it in a process driven way, or it'll drive me crazy. Like I'm like, okay, it's this form, like, but what does this mean? Like, if I have like internally this like image of like of like a fire and like in a circle, like,
Right.
Like what is this? What is a process? What does a form mean to any of that? You know what I mean? Right. I have to write the fire in the circle, whatever form it is, what I mean? Right. So it's like, so sometimes that's when I say like sometimes those things like, kind of are at war at times,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's I know workshops are important for you, right? And there's a training. So it's almost like, not to keep going back to John Coltrane, but I just like really, there's a lot of connections there for me, right? So the other thing I noticed was that, he's taking music classes in his early 20s, right? But when we talk about Black artists, a lot of times we act as if they're just born with all of their skills and that they never like do any training that's going to add on to their skills. So yeah, like what do you get out of workshops and like just having formal training in poetry outside of what your natural talent is?
Yeah, like it's funny because I feel like workshops are my way to think about like what I don't want to do. Like that's kind of how I view workshops. It's like, okay, like they're doing this, like how am I in conversation with whatever's going on in this workshop? That's kind of how I view it. But along the way, I get some really, really cool things. So it's like, if they're teaching about like the sonnet, like they may talk about like somebody like, say, like Gwendolyn Brooks or Langston Hughes, who did vernacular sonnets that were like a mixture of blues poems and the more formal conventions of a sonnet. It's like, oh, okay, like that's something, you know, I'm interested in. You know, maybe like I could do like a, you know, a vernacular half sonnet, you know, like so I take the things that I like and then bend them in whatever way I want to. And I feel like having that like formal training is a good way to, okay, I know what this is, but then I can take it in and then like, you know, like bend it to whatever way like I want to bend it to. And so that's how I really use the formal training, you know, and it took me a while to get there, because when you come in the workshop, it's kind of like, oh, like this is what it is. And, you know, you got to do it this way. And so in the beginning, I was like real timid, but then I was like, you know, even if this is a poem that everybody that the professor gives you, it doesn't mean that you like it. It doesn't mean that you think it's good. You know what I mean? Like you're a poet just like they're a poet. You know, now they are like trained and they are like really, and a lot of the poets that we read in workshop are like really, really doing interesting things. But you have to look at it as like, you know, I'm not coming here to just like say, this is why this poem is right. If I'm analyzing a poem, I'm saying like, how does it hit me? And so that's kind of how I do things. Like, how does this hit me? Like, can I use it? And if not, then I just maybe reject it, you know?
Right. No, that's real. You made me think about your book. There's you mentioned Langston Hughes is kind of referenced in the book at some point. And as you were just talking now, it made me think about theme for one of my favorite Langston Hughes poems is a theme for English B, where he talks about being the only Black student in his classroom and his professor asking him to write a poem and that poem needs to be true. And that he was just, and so his honest response, which ended up being the poem, is that, you know, I feel my Blackness in this classroom and I'm going to go live a different life when I go back home and leave this campus. Right. And so just thinking about that, right? Because we have this similar story. We both were at these predominantly white campuses writing poetry.
Yes.
Right? So like, how do you get to even writing poetry in the first place?
Yeah, like, you know, because these folks are racist. It starts there. It starts with an origin story of these folks are racist. And, you know, I was called nigger one day, and it kind of like snatched me up. Like, you know, somebody hemmed me up like, oh, like you somewhere else. Like you are really somewhere else. Like, you know, and not just location, just like psychologically, you somewhere, like you in a minefield. You know what I mean? Like you are really at war.
Yeah, because this is, and some context, this is Western Pennsylvania and Western Pennsylvania, but this is the 2000s too. Like, you know, so there's going to be younger people watching this. So this is not a story about 1957 here.
Oh yeah, no.
Like
this is the 2001 story. It's 2001, and it was a little kid who did it. And, you know, my inclination is like, I'm running after this car, but of course, you know, it's not, you know, like, so I feel like, you know, once that like kind of like hemmed me up into like, oh, like I'm in like a completely different, it kind of like activated like all of the things that I had learned, like independently and in school when it came to, you know, us and our struggle. Like it really kind of activated all of those things. And so I think from then on, like I was on like a heightened alert for things, you know, like that I wasn't before. And when that happened, like I just started like, it was like, you know, it was like, I don't know if anybody's seen the that movie Senseless with Marlon Wayans, But it was like this movie Senseless where he like took this experimental drug and he could see like super close, hear everything. That's almost how it was. It was like I could hear like all of the microaggressions that happen like all the time. And because at that time, it was no such word as microaggression in 2001. Like,
right.
It was no name for it. So it was like this stuff. It just feels like this feels crazy, but you're not calling me a nigger, but it feels crazy,
right? And that's the interesting part of the 2000s, like 2000, 2010 or so. There was no language for a lot of these things. We didn't have terms for it. You're just living with it. Because I think I've seen like some people get frustrated with, we're in our 30s, right? I've seen some people get frustrated with people our age and older because we seem to not care about things. But it just happened that in our 20s, there were no words for it. There wasn't the language for it. Absolutely. And we just dealt with it, right? To the point that we stopped dealing with it. You know what I mean? I won't say we stopped dealing with it. We stopped communicating about things we were dealing with.
Yes, very true.
Yeah,
very true. And that's and it was just like, yo, like, where do I go with this stuff like that I'm experiencing? Because like I said, like, well, I was a molecular biology major, and it was like me and like one other Black person in that program. Mm-hmm. So it's like all of my classes are filled with white folks, and it was like, the microaggressions are crazy. Like, I remember, we were like after class playing this game, and it was like a multiple choice game, and it was like a question about hip hop, and I was like Russell Simmons, and it was like, oh, and this dude was like, oh yeah, I knew you would know that one, and I'm just like, like, okay, now I'm about to, what I mean? Like, and it was just like little comments like that, like all the time, and so it was like. This anger just was like boiling, like, but, and I just didn't, I didn't really tell anybody, nothing like that. But, I remember, and to the question of like, that's how I first started writing, is that when I saw like Def Poetry Jam, and I saw like the anger that I was feeling boiling, like somebody, exploded on stage, I was like, oh, like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, this is exactly what I'm going to do, because this is the war that is happening like in my body right now. So I was just like, okay, like, I'm doing this. Like, this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Now, I know one of the first poets you saw on Def Poetry Jam was MUMS, yes, who passed away recently. Yes. So why did you connect with his work?
Man, yeah, like I was like a little bit devastated when that happened. I really connected with him because, he was a bigger dude. I'm a bigger dude, like, and he just like moved, like his movements on stage weren't like super like gregarious, but he like moved to the words of the poem in a way like that was like super original and like super like gritty. And then his voice was like, it pitched like high, low, like grainy, smooth. Like he had like the full apparatus of, whatever the words called for. And I just was like, man, like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be able to, really bring to life like the words that, I write, and be able to as specific as possible. And so it was just, he's a huge inspiration for me, because it was like just seeing, like, I saw everybody like on stage, like, from, Black Ice to Amiri Baraka to, Shihan, and all of those are people that I look up to. But when I saw MUMS, I just saw like artistically, just now an ancestor, but artistically at that time, he was like what I, aspire to be, so yeah.
I can dig that. Who are some poets you've I won't say influenced by, right? I know MUMS is an influence, but name some of the workshops you've been to and some of the people you've had a chance to study under directly, maybe in those workshops.
Yeah, like I'm definitely happy to do that because it's the first workshop. I would say the first official workshop I ever took was at Cave Canem in New York. Cave Canem is like the spot for Black poets, as far as like academic, that whole situation. But I studied under Erica Doyle. She ran like an intro to poetry sort of workshop, and she was really great because she exercised so much care. I never knew a workshop leader could exercise as much care as she did for the folks in her workshop. The very first thing we did was like, hey everybody, let's write down all of what make us anxious about workshop. Let's write down like all of, what are our no-goes for workshop? What don't you want people saying? Like she started off with like, like how are we as people? And so she'll always be one of my favorites. And then Joel Diaz-Porter, who's a poet out of the Atlantic City. And it's crazy because like with him, like he is a part of the Black Rooster Collective, which is a collective of poets out of DC. And he is also like a mentor of Terrence Hayes and, and in some ways Ta-Nehisi Coates. But I took like one workshop class with him. And in that one workshop class, like I learned it's crazy. Like he just like broke down like, like metaphor and simile and all of these poetry terms, like in one class in like 2 hours. Like it was crazy, and he told me like one thing that he told me was like, and he wrote this after reading my book. He was like, never write to the lowest common denominator. And that was like, that really like opens it up because I had, confided to him that like I was having issues with like thinking about audience when I'm writing, and thinking about and letting that influence how I'm writing. And he's like, no, like never write to lowest common denominator. Like your audience will catch you, So I think those are two of the people that I really had good impacts. Yeah.
I was gonna say that I think that's a big thing for any artist right now, because we can put our art directly out to the public. So I'm a Migos fan, right? So Migos posted that Culture 3 is coming out this Friday, which is tomorrow.
Oh, I didn't even keep that.
Crazy, right? And everybody's just on their Instagram just hating on them. Like I'm like, you're on their Instagram. You came to their Instagram page to do this. Right. And so I think because of that, we have a lot of people who are artists who are like, I need to hit instantly. This needs to be effective tomorrow. Like as soon as this person hears this poem, they need to like it. You know what I mean? So like that's a lot to say, to not write to the lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To really like write something that's hopefully going to stand the test of time.
Absolutely.
And that you're proud of.
Right. That's the thing, right? Like that's the thing is like, you're the person that's putting this stuff out. Like you're the person like that is writing this stuff. You have to be okay with it. And anytime you make negotiations about what you say when you're writing, like you're not going to be okay with it, because you're thinking about all these other things besides what is coming out, So yeah, absolutely.
No, that's real. Now, when was there is a line of, I'll throw out some information. You'll address it how you want to.
Okay.
So one thing that we want to focus on Branch Normal is sometimes there's a difference between your passion and your career, right? and they don't have to be the same. We're kind of teaching people these days that like, man, 9 to 5, that ain't shit. Like that ain't nothing. Like you don't need no 9 to 5. Like you need to. It's about your last name, right? And it is, right?
Yeah.
So we're teaching that, and it's almost. So I'll go back to even why I wanted to start Branch Normal.
Yeah.
I was a substitute teacher, and one day I was in a substitute in high school for about 2 years, and I was just asking my students. We were talking about money, and everybody wanted to be a millionaire, and I'm like, well, could you live with 80,000? You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, you're broke right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all broke. Y'all teenagers. Like, and I'm not. That's not to say like y'all. They had jobs. Some of them saved money. You know what I mean? That's not to say that they necessarily had bad spending habits. But what we really got to is like, do you know how much your teacher makes? You know what I'm saying? Do you know how much the principal makes? If you made that amount, would you be satisfied with your life? You know what I mean? Or do you have to have $1 million or you're a nobody? And so that's kind of the way we put it. Like either you're making $1 million or you're a nobody, right? So let's talk about money and poetry a little bit and where you find a balance. I'll start with what was the first time you got paid for a show? Do you remember the first time you got paid to perform poetry? Do you remember the amount?
Yeah, like the first time I got paid was Coffee After Dark.
Okay.
That was the first time I got paid. I got paid $50. And I guess because I had like a 9 to 5 at the time, I don't think it really registered with me that, like I was doing this, so I got this. Like it didn't register to me. It was almost like, I was like so energized that I didn't really think about the money, which is bad, but no, that was the first time I got paid. It was $50. My first feature at a Coffee After Dark. Yeah.
Sweet. And this is after, how long have you think you've been going open mics and performing at that point?
This was like after 2 weeks.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, like I had started. I had done a lot of poetry work at Clarion, and it took me a while to do poems in Philly, and so I started. I did this poem at Coffee After Dark. I wish I could remember which one. I can't remember, but I did this poem, and Darius Lance, who was the host, asked me to spotlight like the next week, and then I spotlighted, and then he asked me to feature the next week. So yeah, 2 weeks.
Is there freedom in like having a job? Right? How does work relate? Like, what's the balance between work and poetry work, right? Performing, writing, practicing, and career work, 9 to 5, clinical researcher work. And why do you need both? Like, what purpose does each serve?
Yeah, like I think I'll say before I start, I'll say that I think like I'm finally figuring out why I need both. I think for a while, like, if I'm being like completely honest, like I had a degree that afforded me a way to make money in a specific industry. And I wasn't necessarily passionate about the industry. But it was a 9 to 5 and I could do the work very well. So and because that was like guaranteed money, like I just wanted to keep it. Mm-hmm. Now, poetry is my passion. Writing is my passion. And I have made a lot of sacrifices of my passion.
Mhm.
I have like sidelined my passion because, you know, the work has overtaken, you know, my mind. But I'm okay with that because, you know, I feel like, you know, my work also makes way for avenues for my passion, like, you know, workshops, like retreats, like, you know, different things I can do because I have the money to do them.
Right.
So I think it's like this like symbiotic relationship between the two. And I think now, you know, I'm finding ways to merge the parts, like some passionate parts of poetry, you know, like you know, the topical things, the political things, like into my actual 9 to 5, which is like, you know, making the 9 to 5 bearable. So that's kind of, yeah. So it's been like a constant push and pull between the two, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, like that's really your process, and trying to be comfortable with both. I mean, because it's tricky because on one side you could say, I mean, there are people who say like, I don't need a 9 to 5 at all, or just like deny that they need a 9 to 5, right?
Right.
And like, I'm gonna go do poetry full time.
Right.
And this is not everybody, but I will say for me, that puts a lot of pressure on the poetry, right? A lot of pressure on like, are you creating in a way? I mean, to write poetry is to say like, and this should be true for any art. Like, I want to make the art first and think about the money later. But
Right.
when it's a bill to pay next week, and that's going to make it more likely. I'll put it like this: in poetry, especially in spoken word community, if you know you got a bill to pay next week, and if I do this certain poem, it's going to sell more chapbooks or more CDs and more product than this other new poem that I just wrote, but I don't know how people feel about it, then you're going to do the old poem that's going to pay the bills. You know what I mean? 9 times out of 10.
Right. Right.
So,
you know, yeah. And also, to be 100% honest, like, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, think that, you know, and this is not like, I think for me, like, I feel like everybody has their own path. And
right.
So this is not to like, you know, cast aspersions on anybody. I'll just say people see people doing like, you know, full-time poetry and think that they can do it also, you know, and I'll say that as somebody who also like thought that as well. You know, like, you know, because, you know, we were roommates and I saw you like doing full-time poetry, and yeah, and I knew I couldn't do it like that, but I thought, oh, maybe I could do it in some way. But what I found was that like, but it was good because I got to see like what that was and what I wasn't willing to do. You know, like,
yeah.
I found like I don't like traveling. Like, I don't like traveling like that, you know. So yeah. I can't do it. You know, like, you know, I don't like
12-hour trips to Atlanta.
Right? Like, I don't like traveling. You know, so it's like, how can you really do that if you don't like traveling? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so, you know, and so I think like really understanding your skill set and understanding like, you know, oh, like, you know, you are not as good as like at like, you know, the marketing part, or like, you know, or like getting like flyers together, or, you know, like that part really isn't in your wheelhouse. So like, how are you going to do this full-time poetry thing? Like really like understanding like what it will take for you to sustain yourself. What can you live on? You know, all these questions. Right. You know what I mean? Like, and so I think it is really like, you know, it was really like eye-opening for me. Like, okay, like I know that that's not for me right now at that time. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm keeping this job then. You know, it was, you know, that's just what it was. You know?
I like what you said though. It's everybody has their own path. And that's the biggest thing. Like with this collection of like 50 interviews, like that's really the point, right? Yeah. To me, it's like, what did you do on your path? Like, how did you get to like where you got to? And did that work for you? What parts didn't work for you? Man, I mean, I can't tell you the last time I wrote a poem, but if you had met me 6 or 7 years ago, all of my bills were paid through poetry somehow, right? And so, and I was 100% invested in like my passions then, and like am today. And I mean, today I work a 9 to 5, and it's the same thing. I see things like, because I went to work last month, I can pay for the mic to do these interviews, right? And things like that. And so but that was part of my path, right? That, you know, I would be talking to poets and like, man, I could never write that poem that they wrote, but I'm very curious about them. I would like love to interview that poet, right? And so I think it really is like, and the reason this is important is because this is how we teach teenagers to find a career. We say, yo, do it that way, do it the way that person did it. And like, that's changing, right? That's changed so much just in 20 years. So at 36, I can't even tell I have nephews, right? I have a niece and a nephew, 2 nephews. I can't tell them how to go about a career. All I can say is like, this is how this person did it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, we're both uncles now. And so it's like,
yes,
you know,
exactly.
I don't know. Like, I don't know if she go to school or not. I could
exactly.
This person went to school, this person didn't. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we're trying to figure that out.
And that's probably something like that's probably a space I never thought I would get to. Because, you know, when we was growing up, it was just like, yo, you going to college and that's it. Like, that's just it. You know what I mean? Like, forget about everything else. You going to college.
Right.
You know, and that's it.
You have this line in, it's about you going to college. It's the poem is called A Story About Land, right? And he talked about we won't name the city, but we've said Western Philadelphia, right?
Yes.
This last line like hit me. It said, to transfigure hood, you must imagine old world flattened. I've been kind of asking you to like break down your lines a little bit. I'm going to take a stab at this, like, and just kind of tell you what I felt from it. Absolutely. So my freshman year, I come back home, and my friend Walter Anderson, he was my best friend in around 4th and 5th grade. Used to go to his house and all of that, and he got killed maybe 2 weeks before I got home before this Christmas break. I was talking to my friend. I remember I got home, was talking to my friend Eldon, and he's running down the list. Like, this is a thing. I don't think white people really think about this, but black kids or black college students coming home to certain neighborhoods, you really gotta like, it's a crazy list of things that happened since you've been gone. And so the one thing was like, oh, Walter Anderson was killed. Now my friend Eldon doesn't even know that this was like a close friend of mine in my, like, when I was younger. And so I'm just like, oh my goodness, like, that's crazy. The funeral was last week. And at the time, like, I won't get into like everything he was doing, but it's always tricky because white people speak about black lives as if like, if you were selling drugs or if you're doing any criminal activity, that's your whole life and you deserve to die or go to prison. Right. But at the same time, this person was like the drummer for the choir, for the church choir. So we need a drummer now. Like, the song's gonna be different, right? In church. Like, so this affects the congregation as well. It's not, nobody's just all bad. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely. So my question is, what is that? Did you struggle with that when you went away to college?
Yeah, like, I struggled with it before college because we moved from an all-black neighborhood to an all-white neighborhood. And it was, I had lived in that neighborhood for like, you know, all of my childhood, you know, at that time. And I had so many friends there. And when I moved, it was like, it was crazy, you know? And then like, you know, and so it was like almost like I was like almost like 2 spaces removed from that, because when I moved to the all white neighborhood, like we really didn't talk to any of the kids in that neighborhood, you know, and we were there for like 4 years. So by the time I get to college, like, I don't even like have a home really anymore. like I don't even have like a space where like I can even, I hear about people like, second, third hand, because I'm coming back home and that's not even really my home.
I'm not walking a couple blocks and seeing these people, right? They're in a different part of the city.
Exactly. Like, so it's completely like dislocating, like, and like, but all, these things are supposed to be like markers of, like getting out or, moving up. But ultimately, a lot of times what happens is that you lose connection with, like where your source of happiness was as a child. And so, yeah, like, and sometimes like I'll even now, like I just go back to my childhood home and just walk through there, even though there's nobody, there from when I was there.
No.
Like, but I still just walk through, that street.
Same. Whenever I'm in Palm Bluff, I go by 2001 West Havis because that's the house I grew up in until I was 12. I don't go to 14 Smugglers Green, which is where I was at probably junior high to the time I graduated high school.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. That's the same exact thing. That new neighborhood I moved to was junior high to high school. And like I don't really know anybody in that neighborhood. So yeah, so it's like, home. I don't know what that is.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna come back to some of these topics, college, career, passion. I want to ask you some sort of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So what cities have you lived in?
Clarion, PA, Philadelphia. Define live as in how much time, like having a dress.
There more than 2 weeks.
Yeah. More than 2 weeks. Okay. Philadelphia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Nebraska, Omaha, Nebraska.
Crazy to me. What were you doing in Nebraska?
Omaha, Nebraska, which was interesting. And I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, Dover, Delaware. That's
okay.
Yeah.
Got you. What if you could throw a music festival, right? Any genre, these acts can be any genre, dead or alive. Who would be your top 3 acts?
Top 3 acts. It's a festival. So definitely Donny Hathaway.
Wow.
Who is like my favorite singer. And so I would say Donny Hathaway, Black Thought.
Wait, Black Thought or Black Thought and the Roots?
I don't know. I would say Black Thought. I would say Black Thought and the Roots, but I would say Black Thought and the Roots because I would want some Roots cuts and some Black Thought, solo stuff. So Black Thought and the Roots.
All right, special guest the Roots.
Right, special guest the Roots. There we go. You gotta. And then like I would want to say. I would want to say Shaka Khan with special guest Rufus. Wow. I love Shaka Khan. So that's the other thing. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. What was your first job?
I was a tutor. at the WusGood Boys and Girls Club.
You remember how much you got paid?
It was measly. It was like it wasn't even hourly. It was like a stipend. It was like maybe like $500 for like all school year, something like that. It was like something like real. Yeah.
Like my first job I was a dishwasher for $6 an hour. I did that on Fridays and Saturdays every weekend. I was 16.
Yeah.
I didn't know so stipend is kind of one of these words you learn around 11th grade.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly.
It's interesting the education we get around money and positions, because stipend, I didn't learn that words around that time. Internship, didn't know those were like often free, right? So I remember applying for internships thinking like, oh man, I'm about to get paid. Right. And it's like, no, like not necessarily. This is experience so that you have more experience when it's time to apply for the job that's actually going to get you paid.
Right, exactly.
Which is wild. What were your hobbies as a child? Did you play any instruments, any sports? Those are all the same.
Oh yeah.
Question.
Basketball. I played for Boys and Girls Club Basketball League. And I played the clarinet. And
why the clarinet?
Well, actually, it's crazy because I started playing the French horn first, but I got bussed in, so it was difficult to like carry that instrument home. So I wanted to get something that was smaller. So I said, "Hey, the clarinet."
No, that's
no
real.
Reason, just vibes.
Oh my god!
You know?
No, that's real. Well, first, like I have a appreciation for the clarinet. I was in band. We talked about this before. I played trombone. You were smart though. I played snare drum first, which was heavy.
Oh yeah,
case.
Yeah.
And imagine a fifth grader carrying a snare drum in his case like every day.
Crazy.
So I played snare drum and I played trombone, which is another like not like
long like case.
Yes, another person on the school bus with you almost. Like you got to figure out how to snare drum. You know what I'm saying?
It's crazy.
What years and what grades are you playing these instruments?
I played clarinet. I played the French horn starting in fifth grade, and then I played the clarinet from like sixth grade through 12th grade to high school.
Wow.
And I was actually supposed to be in the marching band in college.
Oh shoot! I never knew that.
Yep. Yep. I signed up for the marching band and was supposed to start school earlier because I was in the marching band, but I decided not to do it.
Decided not to be in band?
Yeah, actually, it was that, I wasn't ready to leave yet. I still wanted to stay because, it's like a big thing. Like you're leaving, home for the first time to go to school. And so it was like, I just wasn't ready to leave. And it was I think 2 weeks before school started. Yeah.
Right. Now, I'm going to ask for some specifics here. Like, is this going to Clarion or?
Right. Yeah, that's going to Clarion. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Cool. And all right, cool. We're going to, like I said, we're going to come back to college. Okay. French horn, clarinet. What years are you playing basketball?
I was playing basketball from fifth through eighth grade, fifth through seventh or eighth grade. Yeah, and it was just because I went to the Boys and Girls Club. Boys and Girls Club has a gym. Okay. And, that's what we would do, play basketball all the time. And I was a huge, huge basketball fan. Still am a huge, huge basketball fan. I knew all the players. I knew, avid basketball fan. And so
three of your favorite basketball players ever.
Clyde Drexler is my favorite basketball player. Clyde the Glide, the Blazers were my first team that I loved. And yeah, Clyde Drexler is my top player ever, and I hated Jordan because he would always beat the Blazers. Oh yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
That's Philly mental. Like Philly is supposed to hate Michael Jordan. Like it's like it's in the culture.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. What are your any other hobbies actually?
Oh, any other hobbies?
Yeah.
Well, like reading. I feel like a lot of writers, we grew up reading a lot. I've read a lot. And also, and this was like probably like later, like around 6th or 7th grade, like I started liking like the water, like really liking, like really getting into like oceans. And so I went to like, whale camp, where they did whale watching and stuff. So that was another hobby that, like whale watching. Or
this is a unique Black child experience. I need more information.
Well, whale camp?
Yeah, I never knew that was a thing until you mentioned it.
Yeah, so it's crazy because I was like, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and so I honestly do not know how I found out about this camp. For the life of me, I can't remember. Like, it wasn't through school. Like, I forget how we figured it out, but I was like, yo, I want to go to this camp. And it was like, I think it was like that's another place I lived too. So it was probably like 6 weeks, and it was in Bangor, Maine. And we stayed in a cabin, and we had like a cruise ship chef there that made some banging food. Like, he made some banging food. I remember that. I remember the food. And we would like every single day, we would go out on a ship to whale watch. And then before we would go out on the ship, we would have class where it was a marine biologist who talked about the type of whales we would see. And so every day we saw like a gang of whales. It wasn't like no whale watching where you don't see nothing. It was just like whales on the side of the boat. Like whales, just crazy whales.
I was like, we've been waiting on y'all. Y'all a little late.
Exactly.
Like, y'all was eating.
So many whales. I was like, yo, this is wild. And so, yeah, and that was great. Like, it was great to like really, really be near the ocean so much. It was awesome.
How is this high school or?
No, 7th grade.
That's crazy. I can't imagine like doing that in the 7th grade.
It was crazy. It was like 12 students. Yeah, that went. It was really great. It was dope.
Wow. No, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, like it was like, and I still don't know. I was like, I cannot for the life of me. I'm like, I don't know what happened, but my dad won't let me forget. It was $3,000. This is $3,000, and you didn't become a marine biologist.
All right, see, we got to stop this in the Black community. Invest in your kids and stop getting mad at them if they don't do whatever you think they about to do.
Exactly.
You don't know how that's going to affect them. You don't know how that's going to come out. That $3 is a good investment no matter what your career is.
Exactly. But I always get reminded.
Jeez. No, that's dope. Like that, it's really good to have like these unique experiences. Like, yeah. Speaking of your dad, what did your parents do for a living, and what were their hobbies?
Well, my dad is a carpenter, so he does painting, like sheetrock, like putting down tile. Like he was a carpenter when he was in St. Vincent, and recently when I was talking, he was telling me about how when he came to the United States, he wanted to like go into being an electrician. And at the time there were like some programs where folks could like become electricians pretty easily. But Reagan had cut the program. So when my dad came over, he couldn't, go into those programs anymore. Oh, so he wound up like like going into like the painting and the sheetrocking and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
And my mom, she was a bank teller, and and pretty much took care of home, like a lot of moms, a lot of Black moms, like was very protective and and yeah, like so yeah.
I can dig that. Do you know of any hobbies they had or things they did for fun or just because they enjoyed it?
Well, my dad, plays cricket. That's his like super hobby. He loves playing cricket, which is like if anybody doesn't know what cricket is, it's like sort of like baseball, but not really. It's like, and it's long. Cricket is like a game of cricket, a match of cricket is like 8 hours. It's like 8 hours cricket.
Wow.
So he played that, and we would go out every Saturday to watch him play. So that was like kind of his hobby. And I don't know as much about my mom's hobbies, but I do know that she liked to go to Tupperware parties because she always took me. So she would go to Tupperware parties, and I don't know if that's a hobby, but that's where she would always be. So
what is a Tupperware party like, if you remember?
It's like the women were sitting around, like I think like buying different like types of Tupperware. And I remember her always mentioning like the Tupperware parties. And I remember one time I went and I accidentally broke somebody's vase at their house. And yeah, that was the last time I went to one of those.
leaving you at home next time.
Exactly. So, yeah. Well, I know she did go to a lot of those, so yeah.
It's amazing to me to see like all the ways Black women like fellowship with each other. I just find that to be like one of the ways. My mom sold Avon, and I don't think she made very much money off of Avon, but I think it gave her the opportunity to fellowship with other Black women as well.
Sure, for sure.
Which is something like, guys, we got to work on that more. Like,
I agree. I agree. It's terrible.
Finding groups to be a part of, it's difficult, but it's a cultural shift. Like, I mean, it's changing. So, yeah, that change is definitely welcome, I'll say.
Definitely.
So these are like a couple of questions about family. Like, just how do you, I don't know. How do you balance work life with, this is kind of what we're talking about already anyway. How do you balance your work life and like your passions with family, friends, relationships? Like,
yeah, like it can be difficult because work is pretty demanding, and I have a huge family. And so I think that can be like, that's cool, but it's also like can be like a little bit overwhelming. Like, it's like, who am I talking to? Like, but I think like one thing that this pandemic has taught me has been like to make sure I have an open line of communication with my family at all times. And I think another thing that also told me is like, talk to my family like they're, friends. Sometimes I think I talk to my family like, they're obligated to, talk to me, and so I think those conversations are different when you think about them that way. But I think like thinking about them more like, hey, like if I don't have to show up my best self, like with my family, like if I'm feeling like crap, the same thing with my friends too. Like if I'm feeling like crap, like, and not really like, I can still like, talk to them. I think that's part of the problem is that like sometimes like for me, like when I would feel like a certain way, like I would just like wall myself off and like just not engage at all. But I think I'm learning to like be like, all right, like, when I do feel that way, like that's when I need the, the family and the friends, So
Right.
like, just like, so I'm like, it's more so like, okay, like I know that I need this communication, so I'm going to make it happen, like, and so that's kind of how I'm doing it now is like, like I know I need to talk to my sister and my dad at certain points, so I need to make sure I call them. I know I need to talk to my friends at certain points, so I need to make sure I call them, even if, maybe sometimes I don't feel like it, or I still do it because eventually, like when I'm talking to them, it's like, okay, like clearly I needed to, clearly I needed this conversation. So
Right.
yeah, so making a choice and making it happen, is what
Right.
I do. Yeah.
No, it's crazy because what I'm thinking about is what my follow-up question was going to be was like, yeah, like what does family and community ideally look like for you in the future? And like, not like now, not necessarily 2021, but like, even if it's 5 years from now. But also like, and you can elaborate on that, but also just to like say, like, I think it's really important what you said, to talk to family like they're friends. Like that's, that's a light bulb moment, like for me. I'll say like, I think 27, from the time I was 27 to 33, family did not hear from me. There was a bit of embarrassment about like what my career was and how I made money. And it's like you said, like, it's just a time where you most need family, but like shame and embarrassment will have you away from family that really don't care about none of that.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree, like, and I'm still not like where I need to be with like family. My sister is like the one who's like on it all the time when it comes to family. Like she's like, and I think for me, like I grew up where, I was like not as connected to family as she was. And I don't have a rhyme or reason as to why that was, but it just felt that way. And now, like I'm trying to get to a place where, I have like a real open line of communication with my family, because like, they just have history for you on you. Like they know like you better than you know you in a lot of ways, because they know your parents better than you know your parents in a lot of ways. And I'm seeing that more and more, that like, I'm more and more, like my dad and like my mom in different ways. And because like, when I lost my mom, like those family members are like stewards of her memory. So, they are who I would talk to get information about her. And so I think, I think my mission is to really, like just talk to the family more. And I think that should be like everybody's mission. Friends are great and they can become family. But I think also family is like, they just know you and your history, so both sides of the family, like when I think about, because, like both my mom's and my dad's side are really big, and I think like both sides of the family, like I need to, really get in more contact with.
Right. All right, cool. No, that's real. Even like I had a talk with my cousin recently, really just saying like, and I don't want to like dwell on this long, but just I know it's going to be people watching this who really don't have like that mother to turn to, right? And so you lost your mom when you were young, and my mother's living, but my mother's had Alzheimer's since I was like 14 or 15. And so anyway, I was telling one of my cousins, was like, the crazy thing about like not having your mom, like some people think that would make you get closer to your family, right? But for some, and I think especially with dudes, it actually takes you away because you get jealous of people who do have their moms around, right?
Absolutely.
And that, like that, there's jealousy, there's oh, like I hope I don't remind you about my mom too much. You know what I mean? Like, because you have aunts, uncles, family members that like can be sad about, like, no, I miss my sister, I miss my aunt, you know what I mean? Whatever. And you know, like, and you're a kid dealing with this. Like, these aren't,
Absolutely.
you're not an adult thinking these things. You're a kid like with a lot of assumptions, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Guessing. And then there's the like, yeah, like every time I see my aunt, I think about my aunt. So it's like I automatically think about my mom too. Yep. And so just like that's I mentioned that just to like, I think people need to like know that whatever success you see in people, you don't know what they're like personally going through. You know what I mean?
For sure. You know, it was very and I think it's important to, you know, note that it's like it's very difficult to go through life without a mother present, you know, without a father present as well. It's very difficult to go through life without a parent. And so I think for me, I went through a lot of like, you know, oh, like I don't want to be like a burden on anybody. Mm-hmm. You know, I went through a lot of that. Like, I don't want to be a burden on anybody. I don't want, you know, anybody to feel like, you know, I'm, you know, overstaying my welcome. I don't want to, you know, because it's almost like you feel like you don't really have like any place where you can feel welcome, you know, or have somebody who's like, you know, who's like totally down for you, like with love, no matter what, you know? And so I think not having that really kind of color, like how I am in relationship with people, and how I, you know, just go about, you know, my relationship with my family. It's, you know, it's something that I had to, am still overcoming. Not had to overcome, but I'm still overcoming. Yeah.
No, that's real. Now, with like just not having these like mother figures around, there are people who step up, right? Or sometimes for years, sometimes for a moment, and have an influence on you. Sometimes you don't even realize in the moment. So who's one of the most meaningful people in your life? This could be family, friend, teacher, stranger who you don't even know their name, like, but who is one of the most meaningful people, or somebody that like may have just kind of helped you along the path, or may have given you a nugget, you know what I mean, that like opened something up that changed you?
Gosh, I would have to say I've been lucky in that it has been like a good amount of people. But I will say definitely when I was in Delaware, when I was in Delaware, I went to Del State for like actually like a year. And when I was there was some people that I knew from being in Delaware, like being a counselor at this program at Delaware State University. And so like they were living in Dover, Delaware, where Del State is. And I really kind of, I wasn't in a great mental space at that time. I had just left Clarion after not graduating, after being there for 4 years. And I just wasn't in a great mental space. And Janine Cornish and Wanda Nesbitt, like those were the two people who were really like mother figures to me, like in a really great sense, in a sense of like, you know, trying to be like, you know, loving, but also like stern. Like I tell people about this all the time, but one time when I had forgot to pay my rent. I got locked out of my apartment. They had put a lock on my door. Del State, they don't play about their rent. HBCUs don't play
about business. It's a business, man. It's a business.
They don't play about their rent. And I had called Janine, and I was like, "Yo, you know, I'm locked out of my apartment, you know, and like I kind of don't have anywhere to go." And she was like, you know, I get it, but you have to learn not to be locked out of your apartment. So You're gonna have to spend the night outside.
Oh shit.
So I spent the night outside. And yeah, I always pay my rent on time after that.
Right. That's an experience you don't forget.
No, you know, and I think it was those things. It was like a combination of like showing like a lot of love. Like if I ever needed a place to stay when I wasn't on campus, like they were always there. But then always saying like, you know, hey, I see you have these like habits that won't serve you at all. So, you know, I'm not going to help you continue them, you know. So yeah, I would say Janine Cornish and Wanda Nesbitt, those definitely were two mother figures who, you know, were there. And definitely like my Aunt Carolyn, whose house we went over all the time after my mom died. And, you know, and those are the cousins who I'm closest to, her kids. And so, you know, those are like the three, I would say, like the three people who filled in as mothers for me. Yeah.
Okay, I can dig that. So you mentioned, and this can be uncomfortable, but I love hearing these stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it's cathartic if necessary for you. Mentioned being in Clarion 4 years, not graduating, going to Delaware State. Can you walk me through that timeline a little bit? And the reason I'm asking this is because, like we talked about earlier, we kind of, you know, we tell teenagers, hey, college is the only way. And we say it so many times that if you spend some extra time in college or you don't finish, it's almost like, oh, your life is over. You know what I mean? And so you have people like at like 20, 19, 20, 21 years old feeling like, oh man, I'm a failure and I can never be successful.
Right.
And so I definitely I finished. I mean, I did like 5 years, definitely was an extra year. But yeah, but I'll say some of the most successful people in my life did not finish college. You know what I mean? So yeah, just can you walk it through the timeline?
Sure. I started college in 2001, and I was there I was at Clarion for about 4 years. And at the end of the time that I was at Clarion, what I didn't know was that I was like suffering from anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. But I, you know, at that time, you didn't know what to call any of this. like
2005, 2006. No,
like you just like something's wrong, and you don't know.
Lazy.
Exactly.
Lazy, right? At the time.
I'm lazy for not finishing. I'm lazy for, you know, so I just was like, I need to get out of Clarion, like straight up and down. Like, I don't know what's wrong, but I need to get out of Clarion. So I transferred to Del State because I wanted to go to HBCU. And I had been on Del State's campus because I was a part of the summer program that I did, you know, before. So I went to Del State for a year, and that was an experience. I can't say good or bad. I'll say it was an experience. It was good because, like, you know, seeing like, you know, all of the Black professors, like, you know, like that was awesome. You know, I just, you know, and also, like I said, like Wanda and Janine were there. So it was a great point of like transition for me. Like I was like, you know, I found a church that I loved, and I would go to church with Wanda, Janine and stuff. So it was like everything good was good there, except for like the like my studies. Yeah, what I was there for. Everything else, right. You know, but after I spent a year there, I just was like done with college, to be completely honest. Like I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I don't want to be here right now. So I went back home, and I lived with my dad, and I started to volunteer at a state rep's office. Mm-hmm. State Representative John Myers, RP, who's deceased now State Representative Steve Kinsey. But I volunteered there, and it was like, you know, I filed papers, I answered phones, I like, you know, worked in ex-offender services, I, you know, worked with college students, like, and it was a volunteer position. I wasn't getting paid. So from like, I was like poor. Like I had no money, I was like, I'm just volunteering at this place and going home.
This is like 24, right?
Yeah, like this is like 24. Yep.
Yeah.
And so I was there from like 2005 to 2008.
Mm.
And in 2008, like the summer, this is in August of 2008, one of the staff members, Marcia at State Representative at this time, Kinsey's office, I think, asked me like, have you thought about the process of what it will be like to go back to Clarion to finish? And I was like, no, I really haven't thought about that. She was like, because it may be easy, because sometimes, going back, if you were good in good academic standing, it could be easy. And I was like, oh, okay. So I looked it up, and yeah, it was pretty easy. And so like, it was like maybe like a week before classes were starting that fall.
Wow.
So I applied, and I like got in like a couple days later to the readmission, and then I signed up for a dorm, and I left the next week. And then I just had a year left. I needed to like it was like a couple major classes, and then I graduated in 2009. Mm-hmm. So it actually took me 8 years from when I first started. But I definitely wouldn't change any of it. I needed all of that experience to get to, where I am now,
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think, yeah. So, I mean, when I met you, like, I would have never known that, you know what I mean? I didn't know that for like years until you told me, like, and I think that's important to say, because it's an outside looking in, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like we see our lives from our perspective, right? But nobody else sees it from that perspective.
It's true.
We're always much harder on ourselves than like anyone else. But even with that, I think about John Coltrane, like he's 31 when he puts out his first album, you know what I mean? At that point, he's gone to the Navy. He's worked under Miles Davis and all this stuff, like has a heroin addiction, right? And like there are these points where your life could end, right? The story could be done, but it's that like jumping back into things, you know what I mean? Absolutely. And like, and also that's not to say like, we kind of put it like, oh, like you were so brave to go do this, but sometimes like you're trying stuff to try it. Like,
you don't know.
Yeah. You know what I mean? You don't know, like, and so like, but that's important. Like, hey, I'm just moving forward. I don't know what that will mean. I don't know what that will look like. I don't know if I'll regret it or not, but I'm moving forward.
Absolutely.
And so that's dope. I really only have one more question. This could be about career. This could be about life. What's one of the things you're most proud of in your career life so far? What's one of your biggest accomplishments?
I think one of my biggest accomplishments is getting through 2020. Like, I don't think I would have, I think that's one of my biggest accomplishments. It was a really, really rough year. And like I said, like, back in 2005, 2001, I didn't know what to call anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And, since I am now able to say, oh, like, you were, forget 2005, like you were dealing with this when you were in high school and middle school, and so like to have like to deal with that for so many years, to not really be able to feel like yourself, and then to like go through a portion of time in 2020 where you felt like it was like completely overtaking you and you didn't see a way out. I think actually like really, getting out of it. And of course it's like, I'm only one person, like, and so like I credit like, you and, my friends in Boston and Rochester who, were like, patient and willing to, and my sister and my dad and, like folks who were closest to me, Because like not everybody who's in the position of like feeling overwhelmed by depression and anxiety have people to be able to talk to about it and then to move on from the space that they're in. So I think like that's just my biggest accomplishment, because now like kind of on the other side of it, like I feel like freer and, able to like say what I want better, like, like just like be like, really, really plan out like this is what I want my life to look like, and, go for it, and so I think like, like getting out of 2020 and really like, doing the therapy and, and being on the other side of like this huge, like depressive and anxiety filled like time is like, one of the biggest accomplishments, definitely what's at the forefront of my mind, what I mean?
That's real. 2020 was a doozy to say the least.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like so we kind of 9/11 happened. We were in high school, and Hurricane Katrina happens in 2005 while we're in school. But like 2020 felt like, oh, I'm literally a part of history. Like, I know people are going to be, my grandkids are going to be talking about this year that I'm living in.
Absolutely. It was so, I mean, the DNA of life was altered, it just, it was just completely different, and so at anything that happens is heightened. It was a lot. And then like, like having my dad, be getting COVID, and then, being on a ventilator and, going through that whole process, like, it was just a lot. And so I think like actually like getting through the worst of that, to actually be like, oh, like, my dad is healthy, like, I'm in a good place with my job, I'm in a good mental space, like, and like with my art, I'm in a good space. Like, it feels like really good to be on the other side of that. Yeah.
No, I can dig that. All right, man. So this is the book.
Yeah.
Jump Ship.
Yep.
Released January of 2020.
Yep.
Before we knew we were making history. Man, yeah. So I'll open up for anything you want to tell us about the book, and definitely include like where we can find you, where we can check out the book, anything you have coming up. This will probably be posted by who knows? It might be, we're artists, so it might be posted tonight, but definitely by June. Okay,
cool. Yeah, like I want to say that I've really spent a lot of time on a book. And I want to like thank Marissa Johnson Valenzuela, who published the book. And I also want to thank Femi, Oluwafemi, who drew like the artwork for the cover, and as well as the artwork inside the book. I think those were like the two collaborators who I worked with who really made the book happen. So I definitely wanted to credit them. And like it's just crazy like that. I felt like this book that I wrote, I had been like really, really going through a lot, and it shows in the book. But it's, even though I wrote a lot of the poems like maybe like a year or two ago, like it's very current as far as theme. And it's and I feel like it's a lot of things that folks can relate to, now. So yeah.
What was the title of the book before we got to Jump Ship? Like, because you never just like, you never had a title immediately.
It was something. It was like, what was it? It was like Blackness or something. Something real, like, like Blackness, a study or something crazy. Like, because I'm like trying to figure out titles and I'm trying to fill stuff in, and then like after, like I had to think about it for a long time. I had to like think about like, what does this mean? Like, what what do these poems mean? What was their journey through, like to get to the end mean? And I felt like for me, it was like really like a letting go or releasing of a lot of things. And it was like, to what, I don't know, but it was like just a pushing off from a lot of things that I had been thinking about for a long time. So yeah, so I think Jump Ship was really, it made sense, with what it was. Yeah.
Okay, I can dig it. What did you tell Femi? When you're trying to get the artwork done, like.
Oh yeah, because it took me a long time to get the artwork done. That was like a last piece, and we were just talking. Like we were at shout out to Yolanda Wisher. We were at Yolanda Wisher's rent party, which is a great event at the Rosenbach, when we were still all out going to events. So we was there, and I was just and everybody was, before my book came out, I had, because we had made an announcement about the book, and everybody's asking, hey, like, what's up with your book? And I'm like, well, I have everything but the artwork. And Femi was there, and I was like, I don't know. I know Femi's busy, but I don't know if Femi's trying to do the artwork. And he was like, yeah, I'm trying to do it. And I'm like, oh, for real? Like, you really trying to do it? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's just one of them things where I'm just like, oh, wow. Like, and it wasn't just like, I'm looking for somebody to do the artwork. It was like, this is somebody whose work I admire. And a lot of times it's like, oh, like they'll never do it. But it was just like, he was like, yep. And he had like a mock-up of the cover like 3 days later or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, like, but it was great because it's like, oh, like this is what it, I'm a big believer in divine timing. Go, this is what was supposed to happen. You was, and Femi was supposed to do the cover. So, this is how it was supposed to happen.
Right. No, it's perfect.
It was great, And so I'm gonna put this out into the atmospheres that, Rashid Zakat is somebody who I deeply admire, and that's who I would like to work with next. So, and Rashid is like a DJ and an artist, and he's like doing a lot of great stuff with like video and like the audio visual right now. And I'm like really, really interested in how like my text can blend with his stuff. So, but I'm like, all right, I'm not ready to, just yet. When I'm ready, I'll be like, yo, let's work together. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
It's so interesting how much music is floating around, like your poetry, because so Femi is a DJ as well, right? So it's like the next artist for the next project is a DJ as well. Then, like we talked about, you playing clarinet, those teenage years. When I asked you who we were going to spotlight, because I was thinking about William Steele, right? Which I got to figure out who I'm going to spotlight him for. But actually, William Steele or John Coltrane, you picked John Coltrane. And so it's interesting to see all this music floating around. So my last question is, I know the answer to this, but your favorite album?
Yes. Return to Cookie Mountain by TV on the Radio is, that's the album I always I return to. I listen to it, weekly, every other day, some weeks. And it's just like lyrically, it's just like it's like my favorite album ever because of just like how vivid the imagery is. And I'm an image person. And so like just how vivid the imagery is. And then sonically, it's just like from minute to minute, you cannot tell where it goes. And so for me, like the surprise is always like where I'm drawn to. And so like those two things together makes that like the perfect album for me. Like, yeah.
No, that's real, because so I was checking it out for the last couple of weeks, and it's just like you sonically you get to this place, you're like, oh, I didn't know I was coming here, but like I like it here. You know what I mean? Where are we going next? It's a ride. And so for me as a new listener, it was like, oh man, I got to get off for a second because I didn't know all this was going to happen. So
Right.
I got a 30-minute limit right now. And it's
Right.
just like, it's so much, again, like it's so much art going on, right? Because you mentioned the lyrics, right? You got the lyrics, and then like sonically, you have something that could just be by itself, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's what we like have to have words. And then just checking out the videos as well, like when they bring in the visuals, it's a whole nother level. It just goes up another notch. And so
Absolutely. So it's like, yeah, and like, you know, you spoke about like that, me with that, like, you know, wanting to work with music folks, and, you know, yeah, it's just like, you know, all of that for me combines on that album. It's like everything is like at the highest level. And so that's where I kind of see, like, when I think about like my work going forward, like I'm thinking about it, like, you know, not really in terms of genre as much, but like project, like what, you know, like what, you know, I'm a writer, but like also like what does this need? What does this, like, you know, stuff need to make it effective? You know what I mean? So it could be anything, you know. So
that's real. That is real. Well, thank you. You're the first inductee into the Branch Normal collection.
yes.
Really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, cool.